Good evening. Tonight I'm going to be talking to you about Carl's lesson. He did Parrots of Puerto Rico, and he did another book called Bird Talk. We're primarily going to be focused on the lesson plan where he is speaking of this book. I'm going to try to make this quick. It's very important that you get your head wrapped around Carl's lesson plan because you will be writing a lesson plan for your final. So the lesson plan in this first segment that all of you write is really based on the big idea or the central focus of the lesson. You can look that up in your EdTPA information that I've given you and spoken to you numerous times. You have a EdTPA glossary. The critical thing is for you to get the big idea and a focus question for your lesson. And then, of course, you've got to go to the standards, and those are found on the Alabama State Department of website. You will have access to those when you plan your own lesson. The lesson objectives and demands, you see. You pull the language of the objectives, of course, must come from the standards. And Carl's lesson plan he pulled from numerous things. This book that he has chosen to use, yes, he did choose it now that I think about it. But he didn't have to go out. He chose from a variety of other books. But you can see that there are language objectives. All of you are very, very familiar with the vocabulary. We know that we teach our vocabulary. One of the ways that we do it when we're doing a read aloud is we embed the definition of the word. And you can see that his primary language objective is to make connections. All of these things flow from this first part of the lesson plan. Everything, like the language and everything here, will feed everything that happens down below it. And the lesson considerations, it basically tells you what you have to have, your prior learning. He talked a little bit about parrots, and my dog is acting crazy. And then the lesson plan details. You have the introduction, and that's important. That sometimes I'm seeing that people are not actually doing this. They're just leaving all of those questions in there. Your job is to answer the question and to talk about how you will introduce the activity. Then you talk about the during and the after, and on the details of the lesson plan. I see a lot of people leave this blank. They don't answer it. They don't fill in anything here. Every box will have questions, and it's your job to answer those questions. And if you answer them and you tie everything back to the top part of the lesson plan, you will see that it will flow. Everything flows from the top part of that lesson plan and from the standards and from your central focus. Of course, everybody should be familiar with the lesson introduction, the before, the during, and the after. And then in the lesson plan appendix, in the commentary, this is truly where you will get the things that you're going to say when you write about how your students responded to all of this top part. This top part is basically what the teacher is going to do. And once you get down here to the assessment, that is what you are looking to see when the students are responding to what you did up above. And you can have more than 2 assessment strategies if you want to. Carl has done a really good job. One of his is on collaborative conversations. The other is the creation of the drawing, which is an English language art standard, visual representation, and the creation of a paper parrot. And he's also built in something to do that's concrete, that's related to reading, to collect words on the perch of the parrot that has words regarding saving animals and birds. And he has all kinds of wonderful things over here to tie the objectives of what he said up at the first, and how does that tie with his assessment. If you're not seeing the language alignment with your objectives and the evidence of student learning and how you're going to give feedback, every bit of this has to be tied to the standard. Every bit of it. So remember, the language of the standard is your friend. You have to get to know it. You have to get to use it. And then you have to talk about how it's aligned. And that's his second objective. And this is how he will give the students feedback. Now, he does have an appendices section that is related, I believe, to his assessment. And I don't know that he wrote it in here, but I thought it was in here. We might need to go back and put that in, Carl. So then all of these things are the things that people are really, really struggling with. Some of you now are almost ready to do your EdTPA. So I anticipate that those of you that are further along in your learning about the lesson plan will not struggle with this quite as much. Now, when it says explain how your plans link the student's prior academic learning, personal, and community assets to new learning, that is your STEM. And you say this plan links the student's prior, you use the exact same words. See, these are the exact same words. And you tell how you're going to do that. And over and over again, you use the language of the what they're asking for, like grouping strategies. Students will not be grouped. They will sit in small groups at tables with random assignments. Then the plan supports. Describe the instructional supports during your lesson that address diverse learning needs in order for all students to successfully meet the lesson objectives. This can include possible accommodations and differentiation. You use in your answer the exact language that they use up here at the top. The lesson addresses diverse learning needs by using college students as mentors who circulate among the tables to check in and monitor students who need help. The students will collect data on how students are progressing by using Appendix A, and that is his assessment note-taking sheet that he would have his colleagues using. Supporting literacy development, what strategies are you going to be using? And this basically is very, very powerful. He is using informational text. Sometimes people will say nonfiction, but my colleague, Neil Duke, who is a great reading researcher, talks about that things are not non. It is informational text. The bird on the parrots is informational text. And then you have to talk about how you're going to do a reading-writing connection. For those of you who have had English Language Arts 301, you know that the writing is a huge part, and the reading is a huge part of English Language Arts. So you're always going to want to have some kind of writing activity along with what you're doing in your lessons. And then this ties here. It says the lesson helps students make reading and writing connections as they create an art project that includes writing, and it's an important part of assessment too. And then he goes into more detail here, tell him what assessment 2 is. And that is a powerful reading writing connection, and he will be using that as one of his assessments. So it goes on, a language function. Here it gives you the language functions. It says analyze, argue, categorize, compare, contrast, describe, explain, interpret, predict, question, retell, and summarize. And the language function that he has chosen is the literacy strategy of determining importance. And he talks a little bit about that. And he ends up by saying that the main thing that he is using is explanation. And here that is here. And that is one of the language functions, is explanation. If you will follow the directions, a lot of the language that you need to answer these prompts is in the question. The key learning task in the lesson is to explain. What is important is in this informational text is that students participate in collaborative conversations to answer the question posed from the central focus. And remember, we talked about the central focus. Remember, we go all the way back up to the top of this lesson plan. Everything is driven from this, and it flows downward. And you will find it written throughout the entire lesson plan. So it's very, very critical that you get your head wrapped around that top part. And we've talked about the reading writing connection, the key learning task, additional language demands. Again, everything that you need to write your answer to the prompt is going to be found on this lesson plan, on the prompt or the question. The language supports, and then the acknowledgments. I'm always shocked at how many people do not put in their references and the materials. You're required in EdTPA to cite research. Well, this is where you're going to be able to draw from. All of these things up here that you have been writing about have to come from somewhere. And you need to be able to name that place from where you got the idea. It can be theory, it can be a research study, it can be a book that you've read, and Carl has done a little bit of all of that. So I want to encourage you to look over his lesson plan. Use it as kind of a Bible for you as you're doing your final. Remember, both of his books are informational books. Thank you.